So hi, everybody. Welcome. Steve Cady here in Ohio at Bowling Green State University. And we have a global contingent of researchers from doctoral students all the way through to some faculty who are here and others who do research. And our goal today really is to explore cross cultural, international perspectives on the research we're doing. And one of the things I'm really excited about, and this is where Yeshim comes into the picture, is she has incredible experience working in peace negotiations and training different cultures, countries, people in different places on how to do and address really tough issues across cultures and in international settings. The technique she uses in the work as a foundation is peer or comparative learning. And what that means is it's a technique that is rooted in the concept of learning. And it's, I think, inherently, when I think of learning, it's about being inquisitive. It's about curiosity. It's about seeing what's there that I don't know. It's being open to learning something I don't know. I gave a talk at ICANN, which is an international conference for deans from all around the world of colleges of business. And I shared Yeshim's story of growing up and her street that she lived on that divided her island into two. And she'll probably talk a little bit about that. But one of the things that she mentioned that really struck me is that conflict is good. Conflict is necessary. Anytime two people come together to learn, to explore, it's conflict. Now, how do we perceive it? How do we deal with it? How do we address it? How is it healthy? Conflict is not bad. Conflict just means there's two different points of view. And in some cases, it might be a learning point of view. In some cases, it's a research point of view. And then I would offer also that in research settings, we send out our articles, we get feedback, and we get different perspectives. We go to give a presentation and people are listening to our research and they're reacting. How do we receive that? How do we take it deeper? How do we enter into that experience to grow personally as researchers? And so in all of that, she uses the peer or comparative learning technique as a tool to help people in very difficult situations to find ways to come together. And I think sometimes you've heard the old adage, some of you may have heard this, don't call my baby ugly, that kind of thing. It's the old notion that, what we create, what's ours, what's close to us is always beautiful. And it's hard to sometimes get feedback and to see what's wonderful about the thing that we've created, but also the opportunities and the edges to grow it. So today is about learning how do we do that in an international context. And because our world is much smaller than it has ever been, I think of scientists like Einstein writing letters and working on theory by waiting until they get the letter back. And then they go back and forth on letters, right? And even that was considered pretty fast. And then we moved to email. And then we now move to Zoom, where we're all sitting here together, really live, in a way that we could never have done 10 years ago even. So today is a really special opportunity. And the technique that is shared can help us with our families, can help us in our work, can help us in our leadership, consulting, teaching, and can help us in our personal research that we care about. So Yeshim, thank you for being here today to share with us that. We're going to go on a journey with her. We're going to learn about the technique, the process. And then what we're going to do is we are going to have a chance to practice some of the steps this time, and then we'll continue practicing the steps on the next one, because we have another session in a month that we can go and we'll continue to grow. And my commitment is to see us build a community of scholars who love to have dialogue, share, and have a think tank place to come around the research that they're doing. So Yeshim, thank you for being here with us today. I'm really grateful. Our students are going to get to meet you in person in July, which is awesome. And so I'd like to turn it over to you and you take us through the session for today.
Thank you. What a lovely introduction. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Steve. And hello, everyone. It's lovely to see a good cohort of very international people. That's really wonderful. That's what I'm used to. That's what I like seeing. So it's really a pleasure to be here. I call myself a conflict management specialist. I have, as Steve said, I was brought up in a, I wasn't going to share this, Steve, but now that you mention, I'll just quickly show the photograph of that street that I was brought up in. Why not very quickly share, and then because that is really where what changed my life. So let me just share a screen and then I'll come back. So here is the street that Steve has mentioned. So this is where I used to live, and this is what really sparked my curiosity about conflict. I don't know, can you see my cursor, Lisa, when I do this? Can you see the cursor? Yeah, okay. So in the first photo, this is the hedge of the garden I used to live in. And this is the street, and this street is a very long street which used to be continuous, but because Cyprus is a divided island, if you're curious, you can Google up what the conflict is about. But here, what really is relevant is that this street used to be a very long street, but with the division, it's cut out with these barrels. And on the other side lived the other community. And one day, I don't know, we never got close to those barrels. I guess it was probably scary, but one day actually I did go there and I found this hole, as you can see in the second photo. And I looked through and I could actually see the people where there was no access at all between the two islands. And I also have got a lot of family history as well. And one thing led to another. I changed careers, and I found myself for the last 15 years doing this job and loving it. Currently, I do two things. One is projects on the ground, which would be based on, well, I'll show you the photo in a minute. So one is practitioner. As a practitioner, I do projects on the ground, and the other one is I teach. And I teach, most of my clients are from the UN agencies, but they're also electoral commissions, NGOs around the world, policymakers, politicians, and it's international teaching. So these are the two things that I do, but I call myself practitioner. So, and the stuff that I teach is mostly related to how we perceive conflict. And, you know, we look at the first picture, it's peace, second picture is conflict. Again, we've got a lot of perceptions about conflict. We think that all conflicts ends up in here, and what I'm trying to teach is a well-handled conflict. This is basically the summary of what I do. I think conflict gives us an opportunity. A well-handled conflict would end up in this picture in my head, and then a poorly handled conflict would end up in the second picture. So this is the theory. This is my theory. This is what I believe in. This is what I live by. When I was doing this work, I came across this method called, well, there are several methods, several names. Some people call it peer learning, some people call it comparative learning. I actually, I gave it a name to this method, which is sort of something that I came up with. I call it learning by comparative relating, which is all what we're going to talk about in the next hour. What I came across was a very effective method which was based on experience sharing and a very different type of conversation. So I started thinking, if conflicts could, if this method works so effectively in conflict situations, and I'm talking about Northern Ireland conflict, South African conflict, Cypriot conflict, Sri Lankan conflict. I'm talking about big conflicts where lots of lives have been lost, are actually continue to be lost. I thought, what else can I apply this to? So here is what I want to really talk about, because I think this, and where Steve and I are experimenting on this, that I think this could apply to researchers and their research work and how they learn from each other. And the other area that I'm looking at is, again, which is very related to your work, your world, which is organizational change management. So I will now share my other set of slides, which is which hopefully I will tell you a bit more about this this beautiful model. I love it. You could probably hear it from my voice. I love it. And then we can talk about it. You can interrupt me. Please raise your hands if there's anything that you want to share. We will do some interactive work later on, but you can always interrupt me. Learning by comparative relating. Just 1 second. This is the wrong one. Just one moment, please. Let me just find the right version. Apologies. This is just 1 moment, please.
Welcome, Megan. So what we're doing, and hi, Sylvia, we're putting in our name and location, as you can see, because what we're going to do in just a few minutes after we learn a little bit more about the comparative learning approach, we're going to go into small groups of 3, and we want to have maximum mix of perspectives in our breakout. So if you could take them, you can click on the 3 ellipticals, and then what you can do is change your name similar to what other people are doing here. And Lisa, our producer for the show and director, and providing the support to how we go through the process of creating groups. So thank you, Lisa, for all that you're doing. I appreciate that. And yeah, so we'll get ready for that. So Megan, again, welcome. If you want to do that for your name. We have people from all around the world, and that's really nice to see. And how are you doing, Yeshim?
Yeah, just it is coming on that the page showing the whole thing has disappeared for some reason, but I will bring up in another way. Let me find the other PDF. I do apologize. I really don't know where that disappeared to.
One of the things that we talked about is laying this out using just a basic, some design elements that go into any methodology. And one of them is really kind of getting clear about the purpose and outcomes of the method. And then the second is looking at who it's for. And then the third is looking at what is the process, the steps. So what I have found in my work, when I look at people who have created scalable methodologies that a lot of people adopt, those are 3 important questions. Again, what is the purpose of it and the benefits? What are who is it for? And then third is what are the steps, the linear steps to the technique? And there are other dimensions as well. And those other dimensions, I can share at another time.
Yeah. Okay, I found it. That's all right. I'm so sorry. It's just a technical. It just went out. I'm all okay now. So apologies for that. So let's just start with what is it really learning by comparative learning. So what is really it? Learning by comparative relating. So it's this method is sometimes it's known as peer learning or comparative learning, and because of its effectiveness, it is used in many conflicts, like I mentioned, Northern Ireland, South Africa, Cyprus, and it works especially well in the context of conflict management, and I will explain why. So it's an effective method for conflict resolution. It's also an effective method for academic work and research development, and this is what we're experimenting here. And also it is used in organizations. For example, one of the biggest hedge funds, Bridgewater hedge fund, is committed to giving employees a discussion environment, outside the normal space. And they use similar to this method, not exactly this, but similar to this method. It's very peer-to-peer learning based. Again, a number of other consulting firms also uses this methodology. So it's very, very, it's a little bit, it's not many, but you can find some establishments who are waking up to the effectiveness of this. So just to little, perhaps a description would be, this method is a way of exchanging and co-creating knowledge, building on each other's experiences. And it is characterized by a flatter hierarchy than traditional instructor-pupil relationship, in terms of instructor-pupil relationship, or boss and employee relationship, or perhaps in conflict situations, a mediator, the UN, and the conflict side situation. So it's a flatter hierarchy. And so the flat hierarchy places the expert, or the instructor, or the teacher, or other person of authority into a kind of more facilitator role, and responsible for guiding discussion areas, and in a way that ensures everyone's learning objectives are met collectively. It's a very collective process, but the aim is not for one person to dominate. It's a very fair process.
Yeah, so one of the things I'd love to do right now, I think what would be good is, I really love how the introduction, what we've shared. So I would like to, in the moment, do just a quick 5-minute breakout. And so what I'd like you all to do is we're going to go into our threes just briefly, just for 5 minutes. And Lisa, if you could leave me out of the breakout for this round right now. And what we're going to do is, you're going to go to a breakout, and I'd like you to talk about what you heard so far. And what are you curious about? What have you heard, and what are you curious about? And you'll introduce yourself as well. We'll just take 5 minutes in your trios or dyads. So Lisa, if you could go ahead and open that up. I'll send the question out, and I like us just to jump in and go into our group. You can join now. And what have you heard, and what are you curious about so far? So take a second to do that. So welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back, and welcome back, everybody. Okay, so how'd the conversation go? I'd love to hear. So you can unmute anybody who wish to just tell us how the conversation went.
I thought our conversation between Megan and I went very well, and I learned a little bit about where each of us are coming from, and certainly that our curiosities are different because our perspectives are different. But I'm into the how for sure. And so Megan, I don't know if you wanted to say what you're into, but I enjoyed talking with you.
Oh, likewise. I'm just here, soaking it all in.
Okay.
I really enjoyed my conversation with Claudia. We talked about our different contexts bringing us to this point, and being students ourselves, but then also kind of our worldviews and how we're thinking about conflict resolution, and how order development and change is a big part of thinking about resolving some of those conflicts. Claudia, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Well, I fully agree indeed, and it's interesting indeed to also better understand from each other the context where you work and live in, from where you are inspired and interested in the topic and convinced about the importance of this topic. So yeah, really valuable to have a breakout very short already at this moment in this meeting. Thanks for that.
Awesome. Well, I have a gift for you all. In the chat is a little present. First one. That's Yeshim's her slides as a handout, so you can see that and see the process. It's a little present, and you can see her process there. So anything in terms of some curiosities that came up that from what you were hearing? Anybody want to share curiosity? And Lisa, Sylvia is in the Netherlands, and so you know, in terms of groups.
I think for our group, which was Charlotte and Herb, the curiosity is the application and how is it used in different ways that it's been used as in the practical sense, and also thinking about what other elements or pairings of constructs could be used. So, for example, like you use this with other models. How does this get used with other models? And maybe just thinking about that. That larger system. And then it also came up to think about how might this be used in a coaching setting. So those were our curiosities.
Yeah. Anybody want to add anything else that you're curious about at this point, as based on what you've heard?
I want to find out about how these hierarchies might dissolve and reemerge, and what that's about. So.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because that was one of the things that Yeshim talked about right at the very end, was the important principle of comparative learning is about the hierarchical position of the conversation, so to speak, or the connection. Yeah. Anybody have another curiosity you want to throw into the mix before I turn it back over to Yeshim to continue? And Yeshim, you can pull up your slides if you'd like. Oh, you got, if you have them up. Yeah, I don't know. Let me check real quick.
Yeah.
Anybody want to add anything else? Okay, Yeshim, so continue.
Sure. I love the questions. I love the questions, and how that I heard two questions. One is how could this be used alongside with other models? I absolutely yes. And let's discover together, even if they could, and then how the hierarchies dissolve. Absolutely. So
if you're showing your slides, they're not showing just yet. You need to click show your slides if you are.
Yeah, no, I haven't shared it yet. I'm just going to share now. Yeah, I'm sharing it now. So yeah, so I saw this quote. I loved it. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember. Involve me and I learn. It's by Benjamin Franklin. I think it is from him. So in a way, involving and engaging is what makes people really properly absorb and learn. This is my experience in the conflict settings. And when people are more engaged, the environment is much more stimulative, and it's much more engaging because there's a first-hand of sharing experiences. It becomes a less competitive environment and more collaborative environment. These are what I've observed, and it breaks down resistance for negative feedback or competitive inquiry. And it also, the method that I'm just going to share now is, and I'll tell you all the details about it, and there is a particular conversational set of tools as well, which also brings out feelings. It enables people to express their feelings as well as their thoughts. So just to quickly look at what the purpose is. So the purpose for using this technique could be resolving a conflict, learning from each other, or other purpose. You know, it could be managing organizational change or other things that I'm curious what else it can apply. And what the actors are really two or more individual groups, and the facilitator, a supervisor role, someone or a mediator, someone who would be able to conduct this session. And just to show it to you, I'm going to go into sort of more detail, but this is the model in one slide. So yeah, let's just bring it up. I hope you can see it.
Yep, we can see it.
Great. So the first part of it is, it starts with trust building. which is agreeing on the purpose. I mean, these seem very obvious, but just still putting it, agreeing the purpose. Why are we here? We are going to give each other feedback, constructive feedback, or we are going to resolve a conflict, or we're going to talk about this problem which happened because of a managerial issue. And then defining the conversation structure and learning the tools. So I will mention some of the tools today, and I'm hoping that we will be able to practice these tools in our groups going back to groups of 3. And then terminology and boundary building. Again, I will explain what that is. I just wanted to show everything in one slide so that you could see the whole thing first before I go into detail. Then comes constructive inquiry, which is starting with myth busting. So please don't worry about the terminology. I will explain all of that. And then the inquiry, the discussion, which is the main part of it. And then the clarification loop, which is going over and over again, what has been misunderstood and clarified. Because a lot of the conversations at workplace and in our personal lives misses that point of the clarification. What have we clarified? And then the reflections is when there is the constructive feedback is given, and there is Q&A and further clarification if necessary. And then planning and agreeing for future continuity, because this is about, in conflict situations, certainly, when we use this technique, it is all about building relationships with others. For instance, we used it in an island called Cyprus, and Cyprus is divided into 2. What we did was we brought Northern Irish communities. They're also divided into 2. So instead of bringing a mediator to talk to them, to mediate them, what we did was the one conflicting community spoke to another conflicting community. So that's where the hierarchy was flattened. And the whole idea here is to bring a sustainable relationship building. So the fourth stage of the model is action planning for the next stage. What are the terms, the frequency, the format, and then the ongoing relationship. There's a question, Ryan.
Yeah, it sounds you're talking about 2 communities in conflict coming together and going through this process. Did I understand that correctly?
In the conflict context, yes.
Right. So, but both of these conflicted communities have conflict within themselves, and you're bringing them together to kind of learn how the overall process. Okay. How many people were involved in the group in total, or the 2 groups in total?
Well, I've done this so many times, but the groups can be from, I don't know, 2-3 people each side, that to 50-60 people each side.
Okay. It's scalable. Okay.
Totally, absolutely. Yeah, it is scalable. Yes. Yeah.
And one of the things I think we want to do is also reflect, Ryan, on the research implications, right? So what does this mean? So when we have people setting policy and they're looking for researchers to come in and bring different perspectives on a particular policy, and the researchers come in to share that, how do they do that in a way that enables different research perspectives? You can think of COVID-19 and all the scientists that came together on different angles and so forth. How did they come together and have the discussion in a way that they could actually advance the knowledge in that? Because there were lots of very strong opinions. And I would see this situation like in this one step. What if you take researchers from another situation that was a highly debated area, and they came in to talk about how they dealt with the different research perspectives around that particular issue. And so the group, that's where the hierarchy, because now it's my peer is coming in and sharing with me my perspective. When I'm in the classroom, I'll bring students from other semesters in to share with the students how they are doing the experience, right? So it's bringing peers in to help people listen and hear in a different way that might help them to then move to the next phase, I think is how the, and for us today, we're going to practice, how do we come together and learn from each other's experience in doing research so that we can bring it into our small conversation that we're going to be having. So Yeshim, go ahead, please continue.
No, I like your, yes, thank you, Steve. Actually, that is very interesting. Which you are, I don't know, I hope you're, I'm sharing another document now, but what you're saying is what this document is putting in conflict context. But, and yes, absolutely, it's a very good way of summarizing how this could be used in a research setting or any other setting. And today I will be very open to hearing your ideas as well, as this is an experiment. But in a conflict setting, this is how it works. That in the first visual here is the classic kind of traditional conflict resolution by mediation. So there's a mediator, and there are two conflicting parties. Conflicting party 1, conflicting party 2, and so mediator speaks to them separately, and then they also speaks to each other but via the mediator, because often when you bring the conflicting parties, they are there's too much tension there, whereas the model, the learning by comparative relating or comparative learning model is the facilitator. There is no mediator, there is a servant facilitator, and I call this servant facilitator because the facilitator is there to serve this process, nothing more than that. And the same conflicting parties, as you see, the orange and the yellow ones are still there. But in between, there is another layer of groups. There are two other groups brought from outside. They are people who have been in conflict and no longer in conflict. So they know how to talk. They know their experiences brought here. So they are the ones, in a way, they are the ones mediating. Right. And the experience is that when other people talk about their own issues and their own conflict, suddenly this little zigzag sign here, suddenly that gets smaller because the attention is now turned into somebody else's conflict. And because the conversations are held with the tools that I'm going to give you in the next slides, the conversations are held in a particular way. So they do it rather than talking to each other, these two parties, they sit down and actually they watch these two to talk to each other first, to go through their experiences, that they share their experiences.
Yeah, and let me make a connection for you here. Think about, there's two situations I want you to think about. One is you get a review from an article you've submitted. You're party 1 and the reviewers are party 2. Now, what do we often hear from people when they get reviewers' comments? A big jagged lightning bolt sometimes comes out between the two because you're trying to interpret what they said. And what happens? In some situations, we just stay isolated and alone. In other situations, we hire an editor, or we go to other peers of ours, or a mentor, or someone who's had experience, and they sit down and they play that mediation role. They help us to calm down and listen to the feedback in a different way. And they give us their experience and they help us kind of decipher through and see it in a way that we can calm down. Now, we may not be able to talk to party 2 because it's blind peer reviewed. Then flip it to your dissertation for those of you that are students. And you're going into a committee to present, and your chair is a servant facilitator. And your chair comes in and sits down with you and the committee. And in that, the committee can play a role of being on the other side to provide an evaluative role, but they can also put another hat on, an experienced party talking and coming in and saying, how can I be supportive in this situation, and actually talk about what I learned when I did my dissertation or how I did that. So it's actually a person can wear two hats sometimes. You can even flip it to conferences that we go to when people come in and speak, and then you got one person presenting their idea and somebody in the audience all of a sudden trying to challenge the idea. And sometimes it feels like they're trying to be smarter than you are, or they're trying to gotcha as a theory, you missed this citation, or you missed that research, or you missed this. And so how does somebody, as the panel facilitator and maybe other people, how do they play a role in sort of helping to you or the person to hear it from a different way? So there's different ways, I think, to relate this to how we go into our research. Claudia, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I'm also thinking of the important part of the second model is the experience party. So in what way are they experienced, and how experienced do they need to be, and are they really seen as experienced by the conflicting party? Because otherwise the level of acceptance is influenced by that.
Credibility is
So
really
maybe you
important.
come to that, but that really is puzzling me already.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Thank you, Claudia. Are they seen as experienced? I mean, I called them experienced. There is no hierarchy here. Somebody's coming to say, I have been in this situation and this is what happened to me. So this is what happened to me. And that's the experience itself, rather than being sort of asserting themselves as knowing more than the others. And they are not making any comments about the conflicting parties' problems. They're making comments about their own issues. This is a model which is used in many other areas of life, not the whole thing that I'm showing you, but in terms of bringing the sharing experiences that way. And there's a particular conversation tool as well. They are used in education settings and in mental health interventions, I think in addiction contexts, in some organizational contexts, in schools. But it's I will give you one example. I have an adopted, this is not a conflict example, this is just about because Claudia, you are questioning the word experienced. And just to give you an illustration, I'll give you something from my personal life. I have an adopted child, and to be able to adopt in this country, you have to go and do course after course, like 6 weeks, whatever course, which is of course very necessary and great. And those courses, I don't remember very much about those courses. I've done all of them in my past, but I don't remember. But I went to a party once and somebody introduced me a adoptive mom, and she spoke to me half an hour about how the experience was. And I remember every single thing she said. So experience is just that. It is not about the hierarchy. And I guess, so in the conflict context, say a current conflict that we are talking about, let's take Syria. You bring Syrians. I didn't work with Syrians. I'm just giving you an example. So country A and country B are currently in conflict. They sit and speak to and listen to the experiences of people who has come out of it on the other side. So they have a peace process now. Not everything is maybe rosy, but there is some progress. So that's where the experience comes as. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. But maybe the next question will come up later, because I think it's not that I'm really doubting about experience that much, but it's about what people who are in conflict, at least is my experience, from my work experience and also from my maybe coaching experience and things like that. It is a magic important thing, I think, is the acceptance by the conflicting parties to hear or to want to learn at a certain moment of time. So that definitely has to do with the experienced party has been there or can share from personal perspective, and there's always a difference. We call it that is like you are talking the right things, but it should be also received as the right things, and also to be like a little bit open-minded to really be able to receive it as well. But let me listen to the rest of your presentation. But I think it's really an interesting model, of course.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you know, in Harvard Law School, they came up with the BATNA, you know, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Most of the time in conflict situations, people don't listen until they're really, really stuck. So if there are other, if not speaking is still a good alternative, people often do that. But when they're stuck, then they're open, and these tools work in that settings, I guess. But perhaps in a situation where we're using this for research feedback, then there is a willingness in a different way, maybe to learn. So it may not be as you know, it may not be similar, but this is something that we can explore definitely together.
It makes me even think about just the notion of being triggered, emotionally triggered. When people are emotionally triggered, they can go into a fight or flight in the back, you know, the neuroscience piece of the back of the brain. And you got to get them to slow down enough to be willing to engage the whole brain. And some people who've been through it a few times, sometimes they just are wise enough to know I'm triggered right now. I got to calm myself down so that I can be open to listening to somebody with experience. Others may be so triggered that they can't, and then you got to use other techniques to try to help them, right? So it's like, how do we get them to be open to learning and growing? So I think it's a really important point, because as we go into research and we go into these research conversations, am I willing to slow down and know that I'm getting triggered right now? I am not willing to listen to the feedback. Right. But I can control that with knowledge by having a tool and recognizing that I'm triggered. I calm myself down. Am I willing to listen to someone else and learn? We call that in sports coachable, right? If a kid is coachable, or an athlete's coachable, that means they're willing to calm down and maybe listen to a tip while they're in the middle of it. And I think coachable from a coaching perspective, an executive coaching, are you coachable even, right? That means
right. Yeah, this is also something that is at the core of servant leadership, isn't it? That you are able to active listen to the other. So should you have a selection process before you start this process? I was wondering, who will be the experienced party? And should there be two experienced parties, or can it be one for the conflict resolution? Sorry to
no, that's it. I mean, they're great questions. So in my experience, now the first question, should there be, sorry, you asked whether there should be one or two experienced parties, you said, and you said whether it should be agreed. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. So to be the graph, that the visual that I just shared, that happens after a lot of preparation. Because if two parties are in conflict, it takes a lot of time to agree with them.
Right.
Each party, who the experienced people are going to be, whether they want to sit in the room, which room they want to sit in, how they're going to talk. So you know, typically in my work, it takes between 6 months to 18 months to actually prepare the sides to get to that point. This is I'm just sharing the model with you, but all of that are being yeah, I mean, I think Claudia also mentioned before as well, and I think you're saying similar things. People wouldn't, if they're not ready to receive, they won't receive it. So it's this is why we need a facilitator, someone to prepare them. Sometimes what we call it with shuttle diplomacy, going between the two sides until we actually get to that point. And the second question is whether one party or two parties work beautifully, because again, give me a sort of fictional example. If a couple is arguing, I don't know anything about couple therapy or couple conflict resolution. I'm just giving you as an example just to make it clear. A simple example: if a husband and wife are in conflict, for them to listen to another husband and wife and how they resolved would be more interesting than just to listening to a husband or a wife. That's why there are two parties. They were previously in conflict and they say, actually, we did this. It really helped. So I guess here, so here the mediator, rather than it's just a mediator and the husband and the wife, it's actually there's a husband and the wife, and then the people who have done some progress, so they're dealing their experience, and the mediator's role there is just to facilitate that dialogue that way. I guess it would apply to it, but as I said, I don't do family conflict.
Right. I think the thing that as we move into the next conversation, which I think will be really good as we practice some of the steps with you, I'm drawing us back to this notion of us as researchers and the notion of how we bring research into solving critical issues, but how do we as researchers bring ourselves into growing and developing as researchers and building our concepts out. And I think the idea is to be mindful of how do these techniques translate, because there's a theme underneath them that really is important to how we can approach sharing our research and learning from others in their research. And really it comes from having alternative perspectives, right? If I go into a room to share my research and everybody here agrees with me, okay, that's nice, a high five and off I go. I'm looking for conflict. I'm in search of people who have a different perspective. And if I find that you do, great. Now, how do we manage it? And particularly, how do we manage it, or how do we, maybe not the word manage, but how do we facilitate from that servant role when I'm actually the receiver of the feedback? I'm inviting you all to go one step further, not needing to have a mediator, but you becoming a little bit of that yourself as you seek knowledge to expand it. And how do you wear these different hats? And when you become an editor, or you become a panel facilitator, or when you bring a research team together, or when you bring research into a group setting and try to help people learn how to apply it as a leader, how can you use this to help us take knowledge and research better? So I'm wanting, so as Yeshim and I tag team, notice that what I'm trying to do is kind of continue to bring the translation into us as researchers. I would love to, Yeshim, with the time we have you go in and help us kind of get started to practice the first parts of this within the context of your flow, your flow chart.
Yes, Steve. Oh.
Sorry, somebody wanted to say something?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say hello to the group, and that I have to leave, but the group is already in the breakout room. Is it? Are they?
We're
still here.
Can
Oh,
hear
you're
you.
still here. Yes. No, I just wanted to say hello to the group, and especially to the cohort 2 students who will come to Amsterdam. And we look forward to welcome you, and I hope also to be there in the next session. But I'm now traveling and unfortunately do not have a real desk, so I'm a bit improvising here. I'm in Geneva, but I wanted to say hello, and if I'm dropping off this session, then it's not because of misinterest, because I'm highly interested, but see you later then.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here so far, and feel free to connect via Steve if you will want to. Thank you for sharing so far.
Okay, my compliments.
Okay. I'll continue, Steve. Okay, great. So just to maybe start the first part, so we said the first part is the trust building and ground rules. So agreeing on the purpose, again in a conflict room, and Steve, I really like when I tell the conflict side of it, and you come in to talk about the research side, and I really invite the other participants as well, who are, I think, mostly researchers. If you have other ideas about how you can apply these principles into your context or the coaching context, so we could actually create we could have a creative platform here. So if you have other ideas, not only questions but ideas, also please share. So the first part is the trust building and the agreeing on the purpose. So agreeing on the purpose. Sometimes what my experience is, when you talk about agreeing on the purpose, people would say, well, yes, but we're all here to resolve the conflict, or do a research critique, or it's very obvious. Why do we actually need to do that? But my experience is it is always, even if it is very, very obvious, it still helps to clarify, to actually verbalize, just to say in 2-3 sentences, this or more if needed, this is our purpose. So that's the first part of trust building. When I saw an interview once between the two sides in Northern Ireland, and what they were saying was, as you know, Northern Irish conflict caused so many deaths, so much, it's been decades-long conflict. And when they first got together, the two parts, one of the negotiators was saying the first part of the trust building was about timing. We both, he says, our side and the other side agreed on meeting at 10:30, and everybody got there at 10:30, and that was the first part of trust building. So sometimes trust building starts with very, very basic things in any context. So agreeing on the purpose, verbalizing it, writing it down, reading it out, and saying, do you agree? Yes, I agree. So that's part of it. What is the intended outcome? What do we want out of this? Then there is the defining the conversation structure. Has anyone heard nonviolent communication and VC? This is it was developed by Rose.
And Theo could put a link to a little summary of that.
Yeah.
I think from maybe Miyashiro's work in the chapter in the book.
So it is, it's a completely different a session on its own. We can actually talk about that at another session. But it is based on talking in a particular way with particular tools, which there's a lot there, so I won't be going into it. But it's about expressing yourself without resorting into verbal violence, as in passive-aggressive violence, because sometimes, how many times you hear people say something to you nice, seemingly nice, and you just say to yourself, why do I feel worse than before? Or sometimes people apologize. So there's so much aggression in our day-to-day conversations, especially in workplaces, but in our private lives as well. Sometimes people apologize, and it actually makes us feel even worse than before. So nonviolent communication addresses a part of that. So defining the conversation, the structure, and the learning the tools is the second part of it, of this model. on today's one, I picked one particular conversation tool. So maybe we could, I'll tell you about those. It has kind of 3 parts, and maybe we could just practice that if you agree. But so the first one is called feeling-based and experience-based inquiry. So again, to give an example, if we are in a, I don't know, dinner party, and I just say to you, oh, yesterday I played tennis for the first time, since my injury last year. So you have several choices we're not talking about conflict, we're talking about conversational tools, and we will bring that into our model and our conversation. So you have a number of choices to respond to me. You can say, oh, where did you play? So you're talking about, now you're concentrating on the tennis, not the fact that I had injury last year. So I said to you, yesterday I played tennis for the first time since my injury. And you're saying, oh, where did you play the tennis? So this is often what we do. We skirt around we don't go into the injury, because it's just going to be a too heavy conversation. And, oh, where did you play? And then someone says, oh, West London. And then the conversation then go into all the tennis clubs in West London. But so feeling-based or experience-based inquiry is more open. So I will, again, the same example. I say to you, yesterday I played tennis for the first time since my injury last year. And then you may say as a response, oh, wow, that sounds big. How did you feel about it? So you're, or even if you don't want to directly ask that, at least you just say, oh, that sounds big. What did you enjoy? So you're acknowledging the significance. These are not things that we learn in the society that we live. Often we get together with other people, we talk and talk and talk a lot, but actually we're not really talking about anything particular. So it's about listening to when someone says something, just to concentrate on the experience, on their experience, not the facts. So that's one that I'd like to introduce. The second one is when someone says something, then responding, first of all, by making sure that you heard them. Again, if you say, yesterday I played tennis for the first time since my injury last year, and then you say, oh, that's big. How did you enjoy? And then I would say, yeah, I enjoyed, but I was a bit nervous. And whatever else. And then the other person, rather than saying, oh, I'm so sorry about that, I hope it gets better, you first of all say, oh yes, I can see that you were nervous. You can either repeat a portion of the sentence. These are such simple things that we don't do in a lot of conversations. And one of the things that I feel really, I feel very superficial is people say, oh, you are heard, or I hear you. I hear you means nothing, because how do I know you really heard me? So just to repeat something back, or re-articulate something back that they say, rephrase it, something, but just rephrasing. And then perhaps the third part would be what I call comparative relating. Say, for example, if someone says, my child cries a lot. I don't know, those of you who are parents, you will relate to this, I think. How many times I would go out and I would say to, she's 16 now, but when she was little, I said, my child cries a lot and she didn't sleep well last night. And how many times I heard from other parents saying, oh, I'm so lucky my child is perfect. She sleeps amazingly well. So that makes me feel really bad, because maybe I'm a bad parent. Comparative relating is, there is a humility in there to say, yeah, first of all, I heard you, something that would replace the word I heard you, or oh gosh, that's it sounds like you're a bit sleepless, or something that to reflect them back, or maybe you're a bit sleepless. And then to say, oh, I had also an experience, and if you did have experience in a similar way, or somehow you can relate to their pain. somehow you can relate to their pain. I'm guessing maybe in a research context, someone may say to you, I feel really stuck at XYZ. And rather than saying, rather than just either not addressing it, rather not hearing it, to say, oh, actually, I also did got very, very stuck once. And what helped me was that, whereas we go into immediately advice mode, unsolicited advice, why don't you do this, that, and the other? Here, the conversation is based on I, based on I hear you and I share my experience with you. So these are the sort of conversation tools. There are so many conversation tools like the NVC based and others, but these are the three that I want to introduce.
Yeah, I like that. And Yeshim, if I could add that, I think this is a perfect time, I think, to go to a breakout for the groups to think about how to use some of these points to listen to each other for the next 15 minutes. And then we'll come back and do a brief checkout, and we'll come back for our next session in June. And what I would offer is the following when you go to your breakout is each of you take a moment to introduce, this is my topic, this is my area of research and why it matters to me. And the impact I hope my research can have is, this is what I hope the impact I hope my research can have. Take a few minutes to share that. And each person take a turn, and then we'll come back and do a brief checkout, and we'll see each other. Then we'll come back again for another session to kind of build on this. So if you could, Lisa, go ahead and open up the discussion rooms. And Yeshim, is there anything you want to share with them before they head off?
No, I just want to add something, not share, but I want to add something. It would be really good when you come back to the main room to give your experience from how you felt as well. They say fake it till you make it. If he doesn't feel comfortable, still try to practice some of these in response to others. And it would be really good to hear how you felt and what felt uncomfortable if you did. So that's what I want to say.
Great. All right. So we're going to all go to rooms. If you could open them up, and we'll see you all back here in a few minutes.
Lisa, I think one person is still out of breakout room.
Yeah, Sylvia, I don't know if you plan to go in or if you're just going to be stepping out. I do have Sylvia in a room, so it's just up to you. Yep.
We can't hear you, Sylvia.
Yeah, you're on mute if you're having trouble.
Sorry. I just sent a message to all of you. I thought that I did it like that. However, it was sent only to one person. So now
okay.
I'm checking how I can move that. Let me see. Chat room. It was sent only to ML. Who is ML?
I'm not sure. Is it potentially me that you sent a message to? It could be. I know I was chatting directly to you earlier. So I'm looking for a message.
Chat.
Did you need help moving to the room?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was did you receive my message, which was 2 minutes ago, and it was
yeah, I don't see one.
Hi all, thanks for the exchange today. I have to leave.
Yeah, I did get one very early on. So I did get one from you, Sylvia. I didn't get one just in the immediate past, but that's okay if you need to drop off. I assigned you to a room, but I made sure they're okay if you had to drop. So feel free if you need to drop from here now, that's fine.
Yeah.
Otherwise I can get you to a room.
Yes, I will tell you the message. So then you can tell it if you come in the plenary.
Okay, I
Sorry,
think
Yeshim, I wasn't paying attention to the clock there that was ticking down.
Yeah.
We know where
Ah.
Theo and I were in a conversation, but we're back. Great. That's lovely to hear, everyone. Any reflections? Because what would be really interesting is to hear how it felt. Because Theo, do you want to pick up from where we left, and maybe people can follow, because that's exactly what we were talking about. Would you like to come in? And
I can.
I ask Theo. I tell you what, I ask you, and then you can, and then maybe you can hear similar experiences. So Theo was talking about what his research is about, and we talked about how I can then ask him some factual things about his research, or I can ask something about his experience. And I asked Steve's question, and I said, why does that matter to you? And Theo gave me a very interesting answer. I said, how do you feel when I ask you that?
And my initial reflection was that I had a conversation very recently where I didn't have an answer for why does it matter. It was a something that, oh yeah, this is important to me. I like thinking about it, but I had actually not really asked that why or purpose question. And so I was in that situation, I felt a little bit dumbfounded, embarrassed, like, oh my goodness, I should be able to answer that question, but I didn't. I'm like, for the question about my research, I have, that is a much more meaningful question to me than a factual nuance about, well, how are you going to do your research, or, what element are you going to focus on? Because that might change, right? I might find that, oh, this is really difficult to look at from this lens, but here's this passion thing that I want to look at, so I'll look at it from a different lens. But the impact of it, I have a hypothesis that I want it to be something that's impactful for informing people and how they interact with one another. I'm hoping to look at how musical human interaction can translate into teams and organization. What is going on in a symphony orchestra that could be meaningful for how organizations are structured, and leadership viewpoints might be informed, and how do you have a small jazz ensemble and interaction between 3 or 4 people? How can that translate into team environments? So that was a wonderful question to respond to. If I might add, in my conversation with Laura, it just felt like I was trying to be more intentional in how I ask a question versus just going with the flow or what's top of mind, based on some of the frames that you offered. So that was meaningful to not just ask the first thing that came to mind, but like, okay, how is that meaningful in the framing that Yeshim has offered us to inquire with one another?
Thanks, Theo. Thank you. I just see I've got some questions back, but I can see that a couple of people need to leave. I wonder whether Claudia and Megan, do you want to say something? How was your experience before you left?
Actually, it was really inspiring to exchange and better understand each other and the research we do. So to start with that, I think by clarifying the research topic that I'm working on, I start to work on, that's actually having a direct overlap with conflict handling. So actually, it's working on the development of new leadership and female leadership related to, on a global scale, related to hopefully better realizing SDGs. So I did a lot of research already and working with my own foundation for 10 years on this topic. And my experience is then also indeed on conflict handling is very important, but also emotions handling. Sometimes actually first tapping into emotions and let the emotions happen is important, because the fear or the anger or the sadness is there, and that needs to be processed, or needs to first like experienced, and then after, and that sometimes takes more time, sometimes can go fast. But if that's like out of the person, literally almost, then indeed you can go over to the topic of conflict handling. So really understand. I think that I'm really looking forward to go back into your slides again after today and have a look how I can make use of that in the next steps in my research. So really would love to thank you and also the whole group, and looking forward to join again in June, and hopefully maybe meet live in Amsterdam later this year.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you. So it's time to wrap up, and Yeshim, thank you so much. This has been really good. And we'll pick up where we left off. I think one of the things that we'll do is we'll look at the first few stages and see how we can use and practice some of the tools again to go a little bit further on our research and to share and continue to regroup. So we'll revisit some of this, probably a little bit more accelerated because more people will come. And then we'll jump right into conversation, practicing that first step and that second. I'll be very curious moving from step 1 to step 2 in that process. It'll be very interesting to see how to apply that, like the myth busting within the context of sharing our research and those kinds of things. So thank you, Yeshim. Any closing comments as we wrap up for you, Yeshim, before we say bye?
From me, well, I'm fascinated by sharing this platform with you, and my last words will be that you're all invited to come and contribute into how we can create, how this model can apply to the research and researchers' world. So you're all invited, and it was a pleasure being with you today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.